I'm delighted to be here before you this morning. I want to play a little clip, and just by the way, I wasn't actually involved in the litigation here, but I want to use it as a starting point for our discussion today. Ellen Powell was a junior partner at Kleiner Perkins, and she sued for discrimination and retaliation, basically because of her sex. And there was months of testimony about all the antics at Kleiner Perkins. And ultimately, a jury found that there was no discrimination. Whether or not there was or was not discrimination really isn't the point of our discussion today. I want to broaden that discussion to talk more about the tech industry generally and diversity and how we can continue to expand our talents in the tech industry by attracting and promoting a diversity of backgrounds and individuals within the organization. But on that note, I'd like to play a little clip with Katie and Ellen Powell.
Do you think the freewheeling, write the rules as you go along, kind of disruptive culture of a lot of tech firms that while they may unleash creativity and be a place where ideas are hatching, do you think that environment can conversely lead to bad behavior in the workplace?
I think so. You've got people who are used to not following rules and they don't know where the boundaries for behavior are. And it works for them in one aspect of their careers where they take risks and they build product and people like it and they get rewarded for it. So it's natural for them to bring it into other areas as well.
Do you think that the tech industry would benefit from some of this more structure that exists in more traditional corporations, structure that is generally eschewed in Silicon Valley?
I don't know if it's structure so much as education and awareness. Like, this is what happens when you have an all-male event. Women in your company feel unwelcome and you're forming business relationships and you're solving problems that you're not allowing women to be a part of. So it's more like, think about the repercussions of your behavior that might not be immediately obvious to you. It's not rules about what you can and can't do, because I don't think people are as open to that as really learning about it.
So that's a nice entree. Just a bit of background. In this lawsuit, there were allegations that there was a trip to go skiing where Ellen Powell was told that they were going to a ski house, they were going to be meeting with potential clients, but the ski house was already full and there was no room for women. Now, it's somewhat amazing that the employer, Kleiner Perkins, didn't know and understand how that message could be perceived. And so I'd like to think a little bit about how we communicate as employers, how we communicate as employees, and how by clarifying our communication and thinking about our actions, how we can improve the workplace, and particularly in technology. I think it starts with some of the observations I made about Kleiner Perkins and their structure. They, as Ellen suggests, it was not a traditional structure. They had no one responsible for human resources, despite being a company that had been in existence for quite a while. They had no written sexual harassment policy. Basically, their infrastructure was really lacking. And so for those of you who are business owners or developing new businesses, I really encourage you from the get-go to start thinking about putting into place structures that are going to support your organization. And that starts with having some sort of human resources function. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to appoint someone to be the head of HR. Your organization's probably often too small to have that, but have someone who is wearing that hat at least go attend a day's seminar. It's not a huge time consumption, and be aware and cognizant. You can go on the internet, you can download some basic policies that will put your organization on good footing. And then really think about your communication style. How are you communicating to your employees? In this case, in particular, the focus of the litigation, the jurors, when they were polled, they said what was really compelling, and they said the performance reviews. The performance reviews, things in writing, really are compelling arguments as to whether or not they perceived discrimination had occurred. And what they did is they took Ellen Powell's performance reviews over the course of years, and they compared them to other performance reviews by people, her peers. And what they noted is that Ellen Powell's performance reviews had common criticisms throughout, and her peers had some of the same criticisms that they then seemed to overcome. And so it's important to think about what you're putting in writing and how you put it in writing. The other thing that I think is interesting is there was one juror who was polled at the end who was actually voted against or was not in agreement with the rest of the jurors and said, did find discrimination. And they said, well, what was the basis for your findings? And she said, oh, the performance reviews. And so it's interesting how different individuals coming from different backgrounds can perceive things differently. And her take on the performance reviews were that they were laden with sexist commentary, and that while the men could seemingly overcome the criticisms, the woman could not. So again, you want to think about how you write and how you communicate. And here's an example. I think sometimes when people are writing performance reviews, we tend to say things, we characterize things. You're too quiet, you're meek, you're too aggressive, those kinds of commentaries, as opposed to showing examples of instances where you actually see the poor performance. So if you go on a sales call with someone, it's not just that they're meek, maybe they're not asking for the sale. And you go on the same sales call with others and you see that they actually step in and ask for the sale. So instead of writing in the performance review, this person's too meek, what you really should say is, I've gone on 3 ride-alongs with 3 different salespeople, and 2 of them actually went and did the ask, and the 3rd one didn't, and that's a real problem. It's still communicating that someone may be meek, but the reality is you're giving concrete examples of where the actual performance problems lie. So those are kinds of things. I want also to think about how perceptions in the workplace. The thought that these highly educated individuals came up with this notion that the house was full on the ski trip is really pretty ludicrous. And of course, I think anyone would perceive that as a slight, whether it's sex-driven or otherwise. And I see this over and over again, not just in the tech industry, but across industries. I'll just give an example, that if you hold a poker and cigar smoking evening to socialize with clients, the chances are you're going to be selecting a certain subset of your organization, and it may not, on average, be attractive to women. Likewise, if you had a mani-pedi day, you laugh, right? I mean, the men in the room laugh over a mani-pedi day, and you would say, ridiculous, only women would want to go to that. But yet women are expected to go to the cigar and poker night, as if, well, women can enjoy cigar and poker. Some women do enjoy cigar and poker, and some men do enjoy mani-pedis. But I think you need to think about how these things are perceived in all of this. Then I would say, with respect to employees, like what if you're an employee and you feel singled out as a minority? How do you approach this? Do you file a lawsuit? Is that the way to educate people? Do you need to, within your organization, start creating your own subcommittees and activities and events that you feel cater to a certain group? What kinds of things should you, could you do in all of this? I think one of the things that I would emphasize over and over again is communication. If Ellen Powell had gone and rather than saying, I feel discriminated against, I feel retaliated against, all the kind of, she was perceived as a complainer. And she may have rightfully felt the right to complain, but there's also a question of, could she have also taken some ownership of the feedback she was getting? So if there were actual concrete criticisms of her performance, the question is, did she ever go to anyone? She had a mentor. She had the head of the organization who had been her mentor, who had promoted her through the organization. Would it have behooved her to go and say, hey, I'm getting this criticism and I'm trying to figure out, is it fair criticism? Is it not fair criticism? Can you help me? And what can I do to promote myself within the organization? So I think it is a little bit of a two-way street, because there are women who do succeed in the tech environment, and there are women who don't succeed. And so to suggest that women across the board are always suffering from discrimination and are never going to be successful because of that discrimination, I think is also perhaps an assumption that's erroneous. That said, I think it's helpful when someone is perceiving that they are not being treated on the same playing field to bring it to the attention of management, but also think of proactively what can we do better? What can organizations do better? Can there be more training? Can there be a mentoring relationship? What are we doing in terms of attracting more good candidates in all of this? So I really hope that walking away from this, there's a dialogue and some thought about this. And the final thing that I'd like to think about in the tech industry, and I'd like to open up discussion here a little bit, I'd love to hear your perspectives on this, is what can we do from a hiring and promoting perspective to attract more minorities into the tech industry? And I use that broadly. It's not just women, it's just diversity in general. But part of it is the male-female issue, and there just aren't that many women in tech. And I think that's something, frankly, systemic in our society, that women from a very young age are told that we're not good at math, we're not good at computers, we're not going to be successful in tech. And you always hear the opposite: he's a boy, he's a math, engineering, computer kind of individual. So what are we doing as a society to promote women, to encourage them to go into these fields? Those are really the dialogues. And I think when Ellen Powell walks away and says education, I think education is not just, I want to educate you and let you know there's discrimination out there, but I think what she's talking about is educating the tech industry on disparities that may exist and opening people's eyes up and trying to get them to start talking about solutions. I'd love to hear from the crowd if any successes that you feel have been achieved of attracting a more diverse workplace or supporting a more diverse workplace. Anyone feel discriminated against?
Okay, so we'll open up to Q&A. I'll pass this on to John. Raise your hand. We'll give you the microphone. Say your name, your company. Let's limit it to questions for the speaker, and we'll get advice for the speaker afterwards. You can talk to her then. So here's John.
Hi, My name is Larry Alvarado. I own a company, College Prep. Basically, one of the things that, as you pointed out, the issue for the jury was the notes or the what they could read about when they were assessed or reviewed, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things I do know is that's a function of HR, that's a function of the company, meaning we're reviewing you, we're telling you how good you are or not good or whatever the deal is. One of the things I do know over time is most people do not add commentary of their own, the employee, that goes into the record. They can say stuff, meaning I disagree or thanks for telling me or whatever. But if you do not put something in writing, I'm not saying nobody listens. What I'm saying is you have less of a leg to stand on, meaning the performance review, did I not improve here, or did I disagree with this or that? If you don't, if the individual doesn't start understanding what they have to do or what they can do, then it's still left to the employer. And yes, you can do sensitivity training or update training or mandates or whatever you want, rules, laws, and I'm not saying things won't improve, but you got to get it on the individual level, similar to what I've got tell parents to do when you go talk to the principal or the teacher. Make sure you put something in the kid's folder. And so therefore, don't you think it's more on the issue of the individual at this point in time? Not to say that the group doesn't have, but the individual needs to be educated much more than they are.
I think that's a great comment and question, and it is a two-way street, because I think in a performance evaluation arena, people may feel very uncomfortable to speak out and say, hey, that's wrong. And it's also, typically performance reviews are, your superior is giving you feedback and thoughts. However, what I do like to see happen, and maybe a kind of twist on this, is if you're going to put someone on a performance improvement plan, is that you sit down together with the individual who you feel needs to improve their performance and say, together we're going to develop a plan. And together we're going to agree on the goals of that plan. And you need to agree 100% that this is what you are striving for. And that kind of addresses that issue. So if you agree together that, you know, I need to make more sales, I need to do a better job communicating, I need a better job of meeting deadlines, whatever it is, the issue, or get training or whatever, you've now signed off together on this program. And when that employee falls short of meeting your joint performance improvement plan, now you're in a position to say, all right, you didn't meet this, and these are your plan, you know, this is your plan as much as it is our plan. So yes, taking ownership is important, but I think it's also important as an employer to understand what potential thoughts or biases is influencing your perception of their performance too. So it's a two-way street.
It's Mike, and I do a program through Pasadena Media. You want to be whatever, astronaut, whatever. But I've been in education for about, well, my entire life, but the question I have is this. The problem we have in education is STEM, science, technology, and math, but the problem we really have is calculus. And getting young, male, female, different ethnic groups interested in not being aversion is like slipping spinach to a child who won't try it because it's spinach. And the question I have for you is this, you know, encouraging young women to get involved in robotics and a variety of other types of things and not dealing with the math. Is there any way that you perceive in education to get young people to test, you know, to try math?
Well, I'll give a very personal opinion. I went to an all-girls high school, and I was on the math team. And it was cool to be on the math team, and it was accepted and encouraged. I actually think putting women in an all-women's environment where they can feel successful, whether that's a single-sex school or a single-sex club or whatever, to encourage women to do things that society might suggest they shouldn't be doing may be one way to address that issue. But I would also ask the question, calculus, and Brooke, where are you? We were actually, my sister-in-law and I were having a discussion the other day about calculus, and I went to take calculus at a junior college one summer and was told I needed a computer prerequisite, which I didn't have, so I didn't end up taking calculus. And I really question, you know, is it the high-level math, or is it just getting women interested in tech more broadly? And do you really need calculus to be successful in tech? And that draws me back into this question of where are we reaching out to find employees, to find talents? And do we really have to draw from Harvard and Stanford? Or could we look more at a more diverse environment at the junior colleges and the people who have expressed and shown an interest in computers and other arenas, or even start dipping down into high school and start promoting people to go to college? And what really is the educational background that is needed to be successful in tech? Is it really pedigree, or might it just be people who show a proclivity and an ingenuity? And what are we doing when we seek to hire? Are we taking a look and looking just for pedigree? Are we looking for actual talent and know-how? And are we testing people who come in and seeing if they have the knowledge base to be successful within the organization and in particular roles, regardless of their educational background?
Over here. Over here.
Oh, sorry, thank you.
Hi, I'm Benjamin Johns at Honorary Bar. I've been at a couple of startups over the last couple of years, and I've done hiring for them. And one of the patterns I've noticed is that especially small startups are very obsessed with cultural fit, which is sort of loosely defined on a startup by startup basis. And sometimes it is, I mean, it's not usually poker and drinking, but it can be like staying up all night on video games, or I've been at startups that are obsessed with Settlers of Catan for whatever reason. And I recognize that like they aren't setting out to create an environment which is sort of monocultural, but it tends to, you know, the sixth hire tends to look like the first hire. When you're in that environment, when a startup wants to find somebody who matches their culture, how do you audit that? How do you say, okay, let's make sure that they're not you're not going to end up with somebody who looks exactly like the 4 people who already work here?
Yeah, I think it's very hard to do in the startup realm. I mean, people gravitate, they want to work with each other. What I encourage you to do is to start thinking outside of being a startup. If you really want to grow as an organization, you can't have it a club of your best friends forever. And that's really, I think, your job. And if you're wearing the HR function, the hiring function, your job is to really wake people up and saying, hey, we're missing all these great people out here. And why aren't we reaching out to them? Because there's this great talent. I would also suggest that a lot of times, sort of to feed into that, this notion that you got to work all night, every night. Well, if you're a mom with young children, you're not going to be able to feed into that culture. And so that's very problematic. There's going to be this point where parents, and I shouldn't just say moms, because I think parents of young kids hopefully are all supportive in that role, and so that may not be compatible. On the other hand, I mean, something you should think about in the startup world is there are a lot of, I would say predominantly moms, but some dads who are out there who are having a significant role in their children's lives, but really want to work part-time and are willing to do so for almost, sweat equity. You might want to consider that when you are short on funds. Here are some really, really talented people who are willing to work, and they may work at odd hours, and they may not be in the office all day long, but they really can be contributors. So think about that.
Good morning. First of all, Leonardo Kablayan with the Consortium for Nonprofit Management, and I'm doing a lot of work with regards to what you're actually talking about, so I'm kind of in your amen corner. surrounding introducing folks in underserved communities to the great opportunities that exist in not just the technology space, but also just the total innovative space, right? And I guess I have a lot of comments, but my question is, how can we intentionally overcome a lot of the stereotypes and a lot of the assumptions that we make in the corporate space? I worked for Compaq and Hewlett-Packard for a number of years, and oftentimes was the only African American in a national convention, or one of few in a national convention. And so assumptions are made with regards to what I know, why I'm here, et cetera, et cetera. And I think there's a great opportunity in the tech space now when we're talking about innovation, when we're talking about thinking outside of the box, when we're talking about kind of like the youth demographic that exists, where they have a different background with regards to interaction and diversity and things of that nature, to really seriously address it. So I applaud you for addressing this today. But what can we do to be more intentional in the workspace about addressing these things that are elephants in the room?
I think the intentionality has to be twofold at a minimum. I mean, I think we, as I earlier stated, I think we have to really reach out in terms of hiring. And then I think we have to be more sensitive within the workplace of diverse backgrounds and diverse ways of doing our job, and having better and clearer communication about performance. And hopefully what people are need to learn to do is really focus not on perceptions, but actual output, and what is going on, what is good, and also recognizing talent. And putting people's talents to use in the best manner. I think one of the things that I didn't get into detail with it with Ellen Powell, but she was in this communications role initially, and she was extremely successful. And then she stepped into this alternative role that was more in a client development type role. And she was not as successful in that role. So the question is, why didn't someone think and say, hey, she was really successful doing what she was doing before? Nobody questioned that. And she's not so successful here. Maybe we should sit down and have a discussion with her and ask her where her talents lie, and ask her what her aspirations are, and think about maybe we find a different role for her within the organization where she can really use her talents best. And that's what I would encourage. I think that's another thing to think about, is once you have someone within your organization, is to make sure you're looking out and trying to find where their talents lie, and putting those and rather than just saying you're not doing well, and I'm going to fire you if you don't do better. Saying, wow, you do this really, really well, and you're not so strong here, so either we need to find a way to get your strengths to be on a par, or we need to find something within the organization where your talents can shine.
Hi, my name's Graham from Future Business Concepts. Has there been any data that basically highlights the number of women versus the number of men going through the education system, that they're getting the skill sets in terms of computer engineering, mathematics, science, that are necessary to go into some of these tech jobs? Because it strikes me we're trying to basically hammer a square peg into a round hole if the actual routes by which the women and the men get the skill sets are not balanced the way we would like to see.
Right. I think that's a very fair comment, and I think that is a huge issue, is we are not getting enough women with that skill set and background. And so I think that starts at a very young age. I mean, you can start it at home now. If you have daughters, encourage them to explore these arenas. I have sons, so the first thing I did with my sons when they were born is I went around and found all the women role models I could. We have a female pediatrician, we have a female dentist. I went around and I think it's trying to promote within society this concept that women can succeed in tech, and I don't think it's necessary that to assume that women will naturally gravitate towards literature and history and will not have interests in this arena. I think part of it is what we expose them to and how we encourage them through our educational system.
Hi, Jared Hardy, Data Roads Foundation. I feel like I have to clarify terms for my question. To me, performance is not any subjective metric, any assessment of even did you do the ask. The objective is the metric, and did you get the sale? So to me, that's performance. The actual outcomes, not anything that you can criticize or apply personality to subjectively. So that's a big problem I see with a lot of performance reviews in different companies and how performance gets analyzed. So have you heard of performance-based hiring? And do you agree with a lot of the concepts? If you have heard of it.
Well, I've heard of skill testing hiring, which is, in essence, and I don't know if that is, you equate that. I mean, perhaps you could elucidate us on what you mean by performance-based hiring.
Lou Adler is the primary author that writes about it. It's a way you write your applications. It's basically you write what the person's actually going to do and ask whether they can do it well, not what their background is.
Right. And I think that feeds off this concept of testing them to see if they can do it. I mean, it's kind of it's what are the skill sets you bring? Can you actually do this? Yes. And I think that kind of hiring is a more objective form of hiring, but then as you get into roles that are more subjective, there are roles within organizations that are not clearly metric driven. I mean, people skills are some of those things which are hard to measure. If you're a chief operating officer, how well you can motivate and lead and get everybody to work together is, you can maybe point and say, I ran this, I was the COO at this other company and that company was successful. And so that may be one way to measure it, but you still won't know if it was that particular individual that led to success or some other aspect of the business. So to the full extent you can, yes, I would encourage more objective metrics in hiring.
Ken Yapkowitz, Director of Technology of the Census Agency. Two observations and then a question. One is I found it easier to hire diverse teams 25 years ago than I do now. Mm-hmm. And that's because the big companies with the big HR budgets are soaking up the available talent pool with their diversity programs, and who wouldn't rather, or many people would rather go to a company with great benefits and stuff than be a startup and working for basic sweat equity and things like that. The other observation I have came from going to reinforce what you said about the role of the parents with the girls. Was at a convention or a conference, which is an invitation-only tech conference for people who have done interesting things to catch their attention. And at dinner, I would sit at different tables and talk to women. How did you get involved in tech? And almost 100% it was their dads would include them in activities as well as their moms. So the dad would have them fixing the car with them as well as their moms in the kitchen. And that made the difference to these women, was that they saw their realm of possibilities and there was stuff they could do. My question is, if you don't have a big HR budget, is there a way are there code words you can put in your ads or something like that a woman might look at and say, oh, this is a job that I might want to apply for?
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that there are ways. I mean, I didn't think about that. I've learned to code in hiring. So I put down, I ideal for part-time work, or ideal for graduate students with backgrounds in XYZ. I mean, I actually put that in. So if you're looking for a particular area, and I also want to comment on this, the big guys are getting all the talent. I think you've got to think a little creatively. I have a good example. So I have a client that's a retailer, and it's, they just can't compete. It's sort of it's not a cachet retailer, and they're kind of old school. And they kept thinking about, well, how do we get people who want to come and make a career of working in this retail business? Well, they actually partnered with high schools, and they developed internships, and they brought kids in. They pay them, they get paid through some sort of city program. There's the whole relationship. They come and work a few hours a week after school, and then those kids turn around and la voila, they're now interested. They're exposed to something they wouldn't otherwise be exposed to. So I encourage you to think about things like internships that reach out, because those interns will go back and share information. Hey, I worked here, even if it's 5 hours a week during the summer. It's a way to attract talent.
Over here. We've got a lot of hands, but I think we're running out of time for questions. And I've got two more. I've noticed that I've mainly been handing the mic to men, so I don't want to be accused of sexual discrimination. Here's a question from women.
Well, thank you. My name is Maria Lee. I'm the CEO of Measure Medical. I wonder if you could share your thoughts, if you have thoughts about how to build a culture from the get-go that is safe for both men and women to thrive and feel excited about the vision of the company.
Right. I think it is creating policies and programs that allow people to be successful on an ongoing basis. I'll just give you one example. Some companies talk about being friendly in terms of maternity leaves, okay? They're like, oh, we have paid maternity leave. But if your compensation is based on sales and commissions, and they pay you your minimum base wage while you're out on maternity leave, and if your base salary is then year to year based on your performance over time, and you've taken 5 months off to care for your newborn, and you return, and yes, you've gotten your little base salary, but nobody's figured out, hey, in those 5 months, this person didn't work, they weren't selling, and so the next year when they go to get reviewed, their base salary doesn't go up because they haven't done well by the metrics of the prior year, because they've been out on leave and they haven't gotten the commissions for that period of time. They're really now behind against everybody else in the organization, right? Who was their peer. And you see that in partnerships a lot, in the Kleiner Perkins of the world. I mean, that wasn't an issue in the Ellen Powell case, but I would encourage you, when you think about implementing policies, that they are universally applicable, and that they promote whatever it is the end is. If your idea is, I want to have men and women be able to have families, to support their families, and come back and continue within this organization, then I think you should develop policies that have paternity and maternity leave, and can really address these issues that aren't obviously creating inequalities on their face, but actually over time may do so. I would also think about the activities where we really get into danger zones. I don't know what it is. It's the holiday parties. It's the outside activities that are supposed to be these team building exercises, but inevitably someone, you've got someone who's an Orthodox Jew and you plan an event on a Friday night. You need to be a little sensitive about people's backgrounds and how they're going to perceive an activity outside work. Are you demanding that someone go spend, you know, an entire weekend away somewhere, and how is that going to impact their support structure at home, and are they going to be able to do that? So I think it's thoughtful planning, in particular with these outside activities, that I'd encourage, in addition to looking at policies and seeing how you can do that. I also think that I would think about mentoring. And it doesn't have to be a formal mentoring program. I think sometimes organizations are really worried. They assign people, you're going to mentor this person, you're going to mentor, and you have to have so many lunches every week. And that inevitably things get busy, people forget about it, it all falls apart. But to go to someone informally and say, hey, we just hired this candidate, she's a great candidate, and I just want to make sure she feels supported. Would you just check in with her every once in a while, let me know how it's going, and then really follow up in that. And it doesn't always have to be the same sex or the same ethnicity or the same faith to be a successful mentor. A successful mentor is going in and saying, I moved over to my firm about 10 years ago, and I will never forget that this partner who encouraged me to come to my firm walked in about 2 months into my job, and he said, my wife has told me that I'm supposed to come and check on you and see how you're doing and how you're progressing in the organization. And I was really touched by that. I mean, it really made this huge, I was like, I'm fine, I'm good. And he's like, well, I'm supposed to keep on top of this. and it's really that kind of informal process, I think, of someone just saying, hey, everything going, let's you know, catch a cup of coffee, let's just tell me about what's going on, and listening, and then somebody at the top hearing and getting that feedback. I think that's very, very helpful. Okay, I've gone over my time.
Before you go, my favorite part of the presentation is to get a picture of you with everybody photobombing in the background. So let's get you standing here. Let's actually go right here, so we'll cover up these empty seats. Thanks everybody standing in the back for not sitting in these chairs. It really helps my picture here. Okay, you ready? Everybody photobomb in the back. Your marks, get set, go.